Welcome everyone to another edition of Play It Through, and on this edition it's Revenge of Shinobi, brought to us by Sega. Revenge of Shinobi was released in 1989 and is of course a part of the Shinobi series. A series which has many sequels and many games a part of it, though it's a little bit hard to follow exactly what order they go in. In Revenge of Shinobi you play as Joe Musashi again. After taking out Zed in the first game in the Shinobi series, you're now taking on Neo Zed. Zed has taken your girlfriend or bride, Naoko, and now you must of course get her back. This game actually features two endings depending upon how you do the final battle of the game. Revenge of Shinobi also has an interesting history that 5 different versions of the game have been released overall. 4 of these versions were released on the Sega Genesis, and they even did a revised version for the release on the Virtual Console in 2009. All of these changes to the game were due to copyright issues. The game features enemies that resembled Rambo, Terminator, Spider-Man, Batman, and Godzilla. Now, originally they just resembled them. However, later on, when the license for Spider-Man was actually bought up by Sega, they were able to include Spider-Man as an actual villain in the game. As Sega lost licenses over the years, different revised versions had to remove the Terminator and Rambo enemies, making them look slightly different, including also eventually releasing a version that changed Godzilla as well to a skeletal dragon. The version of the game we will be playing is version 1.02. This includes the Spider-Man boss, and the Batman boss that's involved in the game is now a devil version. Heck, in the Virtual Console version of the game, they had to once again change the Spider-Man villain to a pink version, and also change the title screen. As you may notice, the title screen main hero of Joe Musashi really resembles Sonny Chiba, the famous Japanese martial artist and actor. So now with all that taken care of, here we go with Revenge of Shinobi for the Sega Genesis. When we start up the game, we have a start new game, of course, and we also have the options. You can change the number of shurikens you start with, the level of difficulty we'll be playing with, which will be normal. You can change up the controls and also do a sound test. Revenge of Shinobi controls a lot like the original arcade game of Shinobi. You have a normal jump, it's pretty high up. Your main weapon is shurikens that you throw out, and you have a limited number of them, but you're always picking up more upgrades to this throughout, and I never get low on them. You also have special abilities, or arts, that you can do. You have 4 of these arts that you can do at one time, and when you use them, they do a big blast or power-up to you that can really help you out, especially during boss fights, which will be mainly when I'm showing off the arts in the game. Like many of the Sega games, they based most of them around the Golden Axe engine, where A pretty much does the special move, or art in this case, or what would do a special power-up move in Golden Axe and the original Streets of Rage. Then you have your normal attack and jump being the B and C buttons. Most of the enemies during the first area are pretty easy to deal with, taking a single shuriken to take them out. The ones that are the worst are the guys with the big swords that you'll have to attack them in the legs when you get the opportunity in order to get rid of them. Be careful also that you duck down low in order to take out the dog enemies. On the second screen, you'll have to attack this wall and then go inside the building. Once inside, watch out for the enemies that are going to be slightly below you throwing their throwing stars right at your legs. Then, when you make it over to the right, you'll see some spikes moving up and down. Jump on top of the spikes to get up to the second floor and you can grab yourself an extra life. Out here, take out the enemies and work your way all the way over to the right, watching out again for another one of those samurai enemies that you'll have to attack low. Once you've taken care of them, all of a sudden an arrow will appear with go on it, pointing back to the left. When you backtrack now to the left, the spikes that you saw earlier are now gone and you actually can drop down here in order to continue the level. Whenever an enemy is very close to you, instead of throwing a shuriken at them, you'll instead use your sword for short range attack, which is easily your most effective move in the game, but of course you really don't have control when you use the sword or the shuriken. Joe Musashi also has a double jump that you can use to your advantage in order to help you get over certain pitfalls in the game, as well as use this to change direction mid-air so you can actually do some turnaround jumps as well. You can only use the sword and the powered-up shurikens when you pick up the power-up item. This will allow you to do a lot of damage, especially the bosses, and most enemies that take 2 or 3 hits will be taken out with a single shuriken when they're on fire when you get that power-up. For the first boss, we're going to use our first art, the Art of Lightning. By doing this, we get a big lightning charge and now we're really powered up, and he won't be able to hurt us and we can just walk in with our Moon Dragon sword, swipe him a few times, and take out the boss easily. Once you do so, you'll finish round number 1, and we move on to round number 2. Level number 2 starts off on a mountain area with a waterfall in the background. You'll have to use your double jump sometimes here, or use your big high jump in order to get to some of the higher platforms. Be very careful though of the flying enemies when you're in mid-air, because they will knock you back when they hit you, and when they do you can fall back into some of the pits. If you're able to do the double jump with the powered up shuriken, you send all these shurikens flying out. This is a great move to take out multiple enemies. Just have to be careful though, because it does eat up a large amount of your shurikens when you do this, so make sure that you have plenty to do this. When you make it here, the logs will be rolling down the waterfall. Wait for the right timing so that you'll be able to make it to the upper right corner where the exit of the level is. In the next section, you'll be introduced to these nun enemies. The first one will immediately drop down a hole if you let it, but the other ones, what they'll do is they'll walk past you, and once they get past you, then they'll reveal themselves and actually attack. This section has a lot of buildings for you to climb up, so start working your way up after the first or second building. Make it up to this section, watching out for the enemies that try to do all their flying jump kicks. They can even do them while falling straight down and just start launching towards you. Do a nicely timed jump so you can make it all the way up to here, so you can make it over the giant gap and make it over to the far right side. That way you can make it right to the exit and move on to the next screen to get ready to fight the boss. For this boss, we're going to use the Art of Fire. With this art, all this fire comes up from the ground and will start flying around the screen, doing a lot of damage, taking out all normal enemies, but doing a lot of damage to bosses. Then, once you actually start fighting the boss, duck down and just wait for him to start coming towards you and do a little kick. Every time he jumps in the air, just be sure to walk a little bit in front of him to cause him to throw the shurikens, and then immediately turn around and back up. This way you'll get behind him and be able to attack him as soon as he lands, and the shurikens will be on the complete opposite side of the screen from you. Repeat this a few times and you'll be able to easily get rid of him and move on to the third level of the game. The third level of the game takes place on an army base. Now it starts off with a guy behind a fence shooting at you, but you won't be able to get hurt by that guy. During this section of the screen, you'll have to actually jump back and forth between the front and back of the fence. You can do this by holding up anytime you jump in the air. You may also notice the guys with the weird bandanas on in the background and the bald heads. Those guys are actually the enemies that would normally look like Rambo in other versions of this game. I find staying in front as far as possible is usually the best bet, as you'll be able to walk through most of the level in front of the fence, as there seems to be more enemies behind it. There's a lot of firepower coming through the section, so if you have an extra art, you may want to use an Art of Lightning just to help you bypass some of these enemies. This next section can be a big pain. Not only do you have the soldier enemies, as well as a couple of different branching pathways with elevators inside this plane, you can also get sucked out of the plane from the open hatches. Just be sure that if there's an open hatch near you, you don't try to stand in front of it. If you do so, you'll be immediately knocked out of the plane and lose a life. Take the top path for most of this area until you make it over here where you'll finally have to drop down. Watch out for this guy with the chain gun here, and then climb up the last elevator watching out for the last couple of flaps. The third boss can be a big pain, as it's this giant machine that has two big lasers that are moving along the ceiling. The only time you can hit it is when the brain of the machine actually comes all the way out. Just keep baiting the laser to keep appearing as you walk back and forth left and right, waiting for the machine to open up once again so you can actually attack the brain. An easier strategy though will be to get on top of the machine itself. You can stand up here and just keep moving back and forth just like we were on the ground, but you'll have an easier opportunity to hit the brain as soon as it ends up popping out, as you can hit it with shurikens from behind. This battle definitely takes a while, and you could use an art if you like to. You can also attack the machine directly when it's opened up, as the brain is actually going back inside the machine for an extra hit to speed things up. The brain will actually change different colors as you're doing more damage to it, eventually turning green to know that you're right near the end. Eventually though, the machine will explode and will finally complete round number 3 and move on to the 4th stage. Level number 4 takes place inside of a junkyard. The boss of this level is actually the boss that represents the Terminator in the game, though they had to change him up and make him a little bit different in other versions of the game. Just like the last level we were in, there's a ton of enemies with guns here. Try to stay on the upper path, staying on top of platforms to give you a better opportunity to jump over the fire. If there's an enemy behind a wall, use that to your advantage to have him use his fire against the wall, and then move in close to actually attack him. Thankfully, they like to put a lot of enemies, especially the ones with flamethrowers, right next to walls so you can avoid most of their attacks. The second part of this level takes place in this factory area with a bunch of conveyor belts. Do a big double jump to make it over the first gap, and then be careful that the conveyor belt doesn't send you off backwards. Over here, wait for the hook so you can actually ride it across the fire pit to make it over to the opposite side. Just be careful and land on a platform that you actually can see below you, and if you don't, you'll accidentally fall into the lava that's in between the two platforms. Do a double jump up here so you can make it to the top platform and start working your way back over to the left, using this elevator to boost you up. You of course want to be careful during this section that when you're taking out enemies by jumping up in the air that they don't knock you backwards, or you mistime your jump so you end up falling down to the pits below, because you may accidentally either land in fire or just have to do a lot of backtracking. Over here, watch out for the fire, and then go down a little bit of the elevator to the exit sign on the far right. Now it's time to battle the Terminator boss, and as you can see, he actually kind of does look like Arnold. Start off by attacking him with your shurikens to the head. You can only attack him during certain parts of the battle. Here we're going to be using our Art of Explosion here, and use that in order to do a big explosion move that kind of commits suicide. You end up losing a life by doing this, but it does a lot of damage to the enemy, and it's the only life I'll probably end up losing during the game. After he throws an item at you, that's going to be your best opportunity to actually do damage to him, as you'll have to hit him in the face area with your shurikens. When he has his arms straight up in the air when he's lifting something over his head, you won't be able to hurt him because it'll just usually bounce right off his arms. Just like the other enemies, he'll eventually turn dark green and explode, and then when he's actually in his Terminator form, he'll move a little bit close to you and do one final explosion, so duck down so you'll avoid the explosion and defeat the boss. We now move on to level number 5, and it starts off outside of this office building. Stand on top of this air conditioner on the far right and do a double jump so you can make it to the platform above. When you make it over to the left, you'll have these different elevators moving up and down with lasers on them. Watch out for the lasers when they fire out and then jump on top of them so you actually can make it to the next platform above. Just watch out for the enemies and avoid as much damage as you can as you continue to work your way up elevator after elevator. After traveling up forever, you'll eventually make it to the roof of the building and be able to travel to the next area. The next area is a highway. You're on a small bridge-like area that has tons of holes in it. However, like the military base with a fence, you can actually jump on the highway itself. While on here, you'll have to avoid the non-enemies and also avoid cars that come closest to the railing. These are represented by the red cars, and they actually can do damage to you, so be sure to jump over them to avoid them. By traveling along the highway itself, you'll be able to avoid most of the enemies, but also be sure that you do stop and pick up some of the boxes so you can get some power-ups. The boss for this level is a giant moving army vehicle. You'll have to destroy these red globes. Start off by attacking the far left one, and when you attack it, you'll see that the whole thing will end up flashing. Just keep jumping over the little bits of lightning that keep moving along the track of the ground of the vehicle. Doing little kicks to it, you'll eventually be able to destroy it. Once you do destroy it, though, you'll see that smoke will start to come out. Then move on to the second one. Standing on the platform that it's also on, you'll avoid all the sparks and be able to attack the globe directly. The third one is a little bit tricky because you won't be able to avoid the sparks easily, so what I recommend doing is standing on this platform below, keep jumping over the sparks and firing shurikens at the globe itself. It'll take a little bit, but once you destroy it, you'll defeat the boss and move on to the next level. The next level starts off in Chinatown. Do a double jump to get up to the first platform and take out the enemy. Then do another jump in order to get to the platform above. Once up here, watch out for these guys with the spinning weapons. You won't be able to attack them with the spinning weapon, but when they stop spinning it, that'll obviously be your opportunity to actually go in for the attack. This level also introduces the dancing girl enemy. These enemies are pretty difficult to deal with as they take a lot of hits. Just try to stand as far away from them as you can and keep throwing shurikens, or, because they like to move back and forth a lot, you may be able to actually go underneath of them and outrun them. Once over here, drop all the way down to the ground floor and then move over to the right to the next platform and then jump up. You'll probably jump up in between the two purple enemies, so either watch out for the spinning weapon or do a low kick to take care of them, then continue over to the right in order to enter the subway. In the subway, they do a nice little effect of actually seeing normal people walking around inside the subway itself as you're moving along all the train tracks. Just be careful because there will be enemies as well as you have the giant objects that are going to be flying towards you as you're moving along the train. Since most of the enemies here are just single hit enemies, it's not very difficult, and your main threat is going to be those objects in the background. Eventually, the subway will actually exit the tunnel as you're working your way over to the right, so that signifies that you're almost near the end. Once you've done so though, you will see a couple of the Rambo type enemies, so keep throwing shurikens from a distance in order to hit them before they're able to get some fire off at you. When you make it to the end of the train, it's time to do the boss battle against Spider-Man and Batman. Now, in this version of the game, like I said, you will actually face off with Spider-Man. As you can see, it's pretty much the exact same sprite that was used in Spider-Man vs. the Kingpin for Sega Genesis. Use the only art we haven't done yet in order to actually levitate up towards the ceiling and hang towards it so you can attack Spider-Man directly while he's crawling back and forth along the ceiling. After delivering a few hits with the shurikens, he'll actually disappear and instead you'll start fighting this demon bat. Now this would be Batman, or a guy who looks like Batman in other versions of the game. Watch out for the little bat enemies that he has out, and hover over him when he's diving back and forth really quickly. It won't take too many shurikens to actually destroy him, but once you do so, we move on to round number 7. The next level starts you off on a dock area. Start off by jumping over the boxes, and when you make it to the water for the first time, you will see enemies actually jump out at you. This is actually very reminiscent of a stage from the first Shinobi game. Jump behind this enemy and actually attack him from behind, and watch out for the two guys in the water trying to jump up and throw shurikens. Then jump to the raft in the middle of the water. Jump up while on the raft in order to attack the enemies before trying to attempt to make it to the platform. Over here, you'll have to jump to several rafts in a row with a ton of enemies jumping out trying to shoot at you as well. Just be careful that when you get knocked back that little bit from their attacks, you don't get knocked back into the water. Here you'll have to do a double jump, so wait for the enemies to go back down or take them out before attempting to do the big double jump over. After one more small raft though, you'll make it to the exit and move on to the second part of the level. This area, you're inside a giant missile base. Watch out as you'll have missiles moving actually back and forth in these big containers, and they can end up running into you. When you make it over to the far right side, you'll drop down to the level below. Then, immediately drop down the next little gap to the left, and walk over to the left. Grab the power up from this box down here, and then continue the ride along the actual missile cart and make your way over to the left side. When you drop down to the bottom, there's going to be a lot of lava filling up this area, so you'll have to be careful and land on the platforms. Even though you won't be able to see some of them, usually right off the edge of one of these, there will be a platform right below you. Thankfully, this area isn't too long, and you'll make it over to the exit as it's time for the next boss fight of the game. This boss fight is against Godzilla. Yes, it's actually Godzilla to the point they even had to change it in later games. Stand on the platform on the far left and fire a bunch of powerful shurikens at him, watching out for the fire blast that he ends up shooting from his mouth. After you hit him a few times, then start backing away, jumping over him, and then moving your way to the right wall, once again doing little jumps in order to hit him, and also watching out for his tail and atomic breath. You can stand on the far right platform as well to get another advantage point, but it shouldn't take many of the powered up shurikens in order to get rid of them and move on to the final level of the game, level number 8. Level number 8 starts you outside the base, and once again has some waves and water to deal with. You also have these giant cannons that fire out huge blasts, so be sure to watch out for them and jump over the blast when they do get it out, as they actually will be able to turn around and fire at you from behind when you go past them. You'll want to conserve your health as much as you can, so be careful while slowly making your way through this area, and be sure to open up boxes in case any of them end up dropping some health. Just be sure to also get the power-up icon as well, so you have the powered-up shurikens. Sometimes the best way to deal with this level is jump into the middle of the group of enemies. As soon as you get hit, hold down so you can duck down below, and then immediately turn back and forth firing at all the enemies on the left and right sides of those platforms before trying to attempt making it off. Here, stand on this platform and wait for this guy to slowly attack, or at least knock him far enough back to the right so you actually can land on the platform with him in order to get rid of him. Eventually, you'll come to a door with Z'd over top of it, and now you're entering the hardest part of the game, the labyrinth. Now in this labyrinth, you have to go through specific doors in order to make your way through it. Do so by watching out for as many enemies as you can. Be sure to duck down here, take out this enemy, and then go through this door with the ring on it. In the next section, take out the Rambo-like enemy, and then enter the door right to the right of it. As soon as you get through that door though, hold the right button so that you'll land on the platform just to the right of it instead of falling down to the pit below, and you'll have to do some backtracking then. Take out the enemy and then jump up to the top area here. Do a big giant double jump up here so you can actually make it down to the bottom area here and enter the door on the very far side near the wall. Here, start crawling underneath this area, watching out for the enemies as you do so, and head over to the left. Enter inside this door and you'll make it to the next area that you need to go to. Here you'll start seeing some flying enemies, and these guys can get a little bit annoying, especially with the ground enemies as well. There's probably going to be a lot of throwing stars in the air, so just quickly try to take as many of these guys out as you can, and work your way over to the far left side. Double jump and attack the wall to the left here in order to get a power-up right before the final boss of the game. You'll have to defeat this boss quickly in order to get the best ending to the game. Start off by moving your way over to the left wall and the enemy will rise on screen. In order to actually attack this enemy, you'll have to wait for him to attack you with his hair. He'll swing it back and forth a few times, and when he goes straight out with it, it'll be your opportunity to hit him with a powered up shuriken. then immediately walk over to the left and do a big jump so you can avoid getting hit by his hair that he ends up throwing at you. If you can get really close to him when he's whipping his hair, you'll actually be able to attack him with your sword and it'll do even more damage than the shuriken, I think. This enemy is very hard to hit, but it doesn't take too many hits with the power-up in order to actually defeat him. As long as you get rid of him before the wall ends up crushing your bride, you get the best ending to Revenge of Shinobi. The ending for Revenge of Shinobi is rather simple: the setting sun in the background and Joe and his bride standing on the cliff. Revenge of Shinobi is easily one of my favorite action games available on the Sega Genesis, and it's one of those games I always think of when I think of the name Sega. Now that we've seen the good ending for Revenge of Shinobi, let's look at the bad ending. After either ending, it goes back to the Sega Genesis screen and you can start the game all over again. And with that, that's going to wrap up this edition of Play It Through. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.